In today's program, I want to talk to you about a patriot, a defender of his fatherland, a man who is not forcing the church to pay for the killing of babies, and a man who Forbes magazine just voted the most powerful man on earth. This is the voice of resistance.
Those who forsake the law praise the wicked. Those who uphold the law resist them. Welcome to the Voice of Resistance. Here's your host, Randall Terry.
I want to thank those of you who have continued to pray for my son, Michael Winston, who is fighting against cancer. We had to pluck up and move quickly to Memphis for his treatment at St. Jude Children's Hospital. And that means we have to rebuild our studio here. And you can see that we're recording outside today, and there's a major storm front moving in. So this ought to be fun. And I ask you to pray with us and for us that we could quickly finish our new studio here. And if you want to help us financially, boy, we need the help. We've gotten most of it done, but we still need to finish. All right. Let's talk about the most powerful man in the world, a patriot, somebody defending the fatherland, somebody who's following his own course, who was voted the most powerful man in the world by Forbes magazine. Do you know? You ready? Russian President Vladimir Putin. Yeah. The Russian President Vladimir Putin voted the most powerful man in the world. Behind him, President Barack Hussein Obama. And behind him, Chinese leader Xi Jinping. And then in fourth place, the Roman Pontiff, Pope Francis I. Boy, oh boy, nothing could better define the struggle of good and evil, right and wrong, the church militant versus militant socialists and militant patriots who are not anchored to an ethical system that pleases Almighty God, than the pick of those four men. Let's look at it. But first, I want to read the opening two paragraphs of the Forbes magazine article, Forbes magazine, where they introduced him as the winner. Because I want to show you the idiocy of what's going on here. Power has been called many things. Pretty isn't one of them. No one would call Vladimir Putin a good guy. In 2014, he strong-armed his way into possession of Crimea and waged an ugly proxy war in neighboring Ukraine, during which an almost certainly Russian-supplied surface-to-air missile downed a civilian jetliner. But as the undisputed, unpredictable, and unaccountable head of an energy-rich, nuclear-tipped state, no one would ever call him weak. So who's more powerful? The omnipotent head of a feisty former superpower, or the handcuffed head of the most dominant country in the world? For the second year running, our votes went with the Russian president as the world's most powerful person. All right, number one, what idiot in the editorial team of Forbes would call Russia a former superpower? Yes, the Soviet Union broke up, okay? But Russia still has a massive nuclear arsenal. Russia still has arguably the largest oil fields in the world, okay? Russia has a very large population. To say that they're a former superpower is foolishness, all right? To not admit that they are a superpower is foolishness. That's number one. People will argue with me, all right? People want to say that's a unipolar world, that there's only one world superpower. It simply isn't true, people. It simply isn't true. Who gets to define a superpower? The Chinese government's, the Chinese economy is already bigger than ours. All right? The Chinese have nuclear missiles that can hit America's shores. The Chinese just recently purchased 2 aircraft carriers. The Chinese have 7 billion people. The Chinese are building a military infrastructure at an astounding rate, have millions of men in arms. I mean, and they are creating hegemony in the area. So there's all this talk now because Russia has just agreed at the 11th hour to build not one, but 2 nuclear facilities for Iran. Russia knows that they're going to make nuclear weapons with these. And Russia knows that Iran is concerned with the great Satan, America, and with Israel, not with Russia. And the only nation where Russia has a foothold in the Middle East is Syria. And Syria is a puppet for who? Iran. All right? Iran props up the Syrian government. And now Russia is saying, we're going to help you. We're going to help you build a nuclear power plant. So if Israel or the U.S. decides to take out a nuclear power plant where the Russians are working and Russian people die, do you think that's going to come into the equation? You betcha it is. And then whoever wrote this said that, they took Crimea. Well, Crimea has historically belonged to the Russians, okay? We took Hawaii, didn't belong to us. We've taken a good bit of chunks of land. We took Florida, didn't belong to us, all right? We took large swaths of land from the Mexicans. The hypocrisy, the folly of articles like this that are, I want to say jingoistic, or they're also where you fear hegemony, xenophobic. I don't know what to call these things, but at the end of the day, the Russian leader is a patriot. He's defending the land of his fathers. So remember, we went over that in yesterday's show, what patriotism means? If you've missed it, look in the archives and watch it. The true meaning of patriotism. And President Obama is not a patriot. All right? Unless you want to say that he's defending the land of his fathers in Kenya, or he's defending his father's communist socialist leanings, his true daddy. All right? But Obama is clearly not an American patriot. And Vladimir Putin is a Russian patriot, defending the fatherland. I've got to take a break. I want to bring this around to you and I being a part of the church militant and looking at those 4 people and the battles that are at stake. Don't go away.
You have 2 choices. I mean, you can try to raise your children by design, or you will raise them by default. There are no perfect parents. We're going to get it wrong sometimes. If we have a plan, we've got a better chance of getting it right in the long run.
There is something deep within the heart of every human being that longs for parental acceptance and approval. When does a boy become a man?
Get a group of guys around and ask them that question.
I don't think there's a certain age. Some men stay boys their whole life.
I would say, 16, 18 years old.
Wow, that's a good question.
When they get bar mitzvah.
Well, I think when he has a child. So I just became at 56, 56 years old.
Without the power of the Holy Spirit changing us and giving us power over our sin, we can't hope to be the dads that our kids need us to be.
All right, so Vladimir Putin and the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, they are now becoming buds, okay? And there is an association of states in that area, which includes Russia and China and Turkestan and other former Soviet republics, that have recently recut an energy deal, all right? China is thirsty for oil, and Russia's got it. Russia's thirsty for cash, and the Chinese have it, okay? China holds over 25% of America's debt. They are the largest manufacturing country in the world. Go up and down the aisles of Walmart, where it used to say proudly made in the USA. Man, they tore those signs down a long time ago because now they're proudly made in China. Okay? So you've got the most powerful man in the world. He's Russian President Vladimir Putin. Second most powerful man in the world, U.S. President Barack Obama. Third most powerful man in the world, Xi Jinping. And the fourth most powerful man in the world, Pope Francis. Stalin, Joseph Stalin, the former leader of the Soviet Union, who's on fire for God right now. He's a very strong believer. He he mocked the Pope back in his day and said, how many divisions does he have? Well, he's a man who didn't know his history. It wasn't an issue of how many divisions of loaded guns. It was an issue of how many people have devotion to the Catholic Church, number one, and number two, Christianity in general. So Pope Francis is causing a lot of people consternation, as we know, if you've watched this show. But at the end of the day, he is still a very powerful man. And Forbes said he's the fourth most powerful man in the world. But if you look at these four men, I mean, what do you have? You have Vladimir Putin, who is certainly a strong man. You have Xi Jinping, who's a dictator. And at least in Russia, they have some freedom of the press. I mean, they're hiding Edward Snowden, for goodness sake, okay? And they let people use the internet. And they let people publish articles that criticize the Russian government. In China, they don't have that. And yet, our U.S. president gives China, and as does our Congress, most favored nation status. Our U.S. president is trying to force Christian businesses and Christian churches to fund the murder of babies through Obamacare. Vladimir Putin is not trying to force the Russian Orthodox Church to pay for the murder of babies, okay? Obama, as the head of the NSA, is leading a heretofore unfathomable spy network against American citizens. I'm betting that Russia's spy system, whatever it is nothing compared to what the Americans have done, right? Obama is pushing the militant homosexual agenda at every turn that he can, and literally refused to uphold the law. Obama is lawless. He refused to uphold the DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. And yet Putin upheld Russian law, remember, during the Olympics, and said we will not allow homosexual propaganda geared towards seducing minors into the homosexual lifestyle. Who's the bigger villain here? I'm doing this on purpose. I'm doing this on purpose because there's a need in the American political debate, and especially in the American Christian community. There's a need to think historically, to think accurately, to think biblically. All right? Do I think that Vladimir Putin is a villain? Yeah, he probably is. Do I think Xi Jinping is a villain? There's no question he is. Do I think Barack Hussein Obama is a villain? Yes, yes, yes. There's no question that Obama is a villain. Then enter the Republican leaders like John Boehner, who went around and gave money and campaign support to militant homosexuals who are trying to bring about the institution of same-gender marriage. And you can start to see that the villain status can be spread around pretty widely. Not to mention that John Boehner continues to vote to fund Planned Parenthood, a criminal syndicate committed to protecting pedophiles and pimps and those who bring horrific harm to children. So our mission as members of the church militant, and I again want to read to you the definition from Webster of the church militant that we read on yesterday's program. Church militant, the Christian church on earth, which is supposed to be engaged in a constant warfare against its enemies, and thus distinguished from the church triumphant in heaven. Our brothers and sisters in Christ who have made it to the next life and are with God in heaven, they're the church triumphant, okay? We're the church militant. Those of us who claim to be followers of Jesus Christ, whatever denomination we're from, all right? We are supposed to be engaged in the fight against evil, all right? The enemies of righteousness. And righteousness and evil are not defined by our political leaders. They're not defined by our masters at the Supreme Court. They are defined by the laws of God. and the historic teachings of the Christian church. Our mission is to be the church militant, to stand against the evils, whether they're from Putin or Jinping or Obama. I'll be right back. Do you want to get America out of the hands of wicked and unjust men and women who are destroying the republic before our eyes, and put leadership back into the hands of righteous men and women so that we don't die as a nation? Well, you're talking about social revolution, and there are rules in social revolution. We can look at the victorious social revolutions of the past, such as the end of slavery, the end of child labor, women's voting rights, the end of segregation, and so much more, and learn from their victories. Look at their actions, their images, their rhetoric, their sacrifices, and their final fruit. We will send you this series that originally cost $129, 7 books for students, 1 teacher's guide, if you'll give a gift of any size and just pay for shipping and handling. Take advantage of it today. I know that these are dark days, and I also know how much I don't want to think about it. In other words, if you're like me, and maybe you are, maybe you're not, you just get to the point where you're like, I can't take it anymore. I have to turn off the TV. And I have to not watch the news. I have to not read the news. I have to just focus on my family and pray and try and have some peace of God and peace of mind and sense of, Lord, I'm here to serve you, but it's a dark hour. There have been a lot worse times. I know there's people out there that are saying, man, this is the worst time it's ever been in the world. It's possible, but I don't think so. Look at the first 3 centuries of the church. The horrifying persecutions that Christians endured. I mean, horrifying, okay? Look at various the times when the Muslim armies made it into the Iberian Peninsula and held Spain for hundreds of years, torturing, brutally murdering Christians. That was a dark time. Look at the Greeks being held captive and hostage by the Muslims for close to 400 years. Not a church bell was allowed to be rung. They finally got free. I mean, those were dark times. This is a dark time for America. It's certainly not the darkest, and God knows what the future holds. It's a dark time for the world, but things can get worse. So our mission is to try and maintain our internal equilibrium and to continue to stand and fight for what is true and right and just, and to try and make tactical decisions, ethically motivated, all right, by the laws of the Lord. Make tactical decisions that will result in righteousness prevailing. And, you know, that brings me to a small discussion about the Republican Party. There were people in California who had a movement, a pretty significant one there, for Christians to vote for the Democratic candidate against DeMaio, the homosexual candidate for the Republicans for the San Diego area. And the GOP homosexual Republican lost. DeMaio lost. And what the Christians there were saying was, look, we hate this Democrat, or we hate his policies, and he's a wicked man. But DeMaio represents the demise of the Republican Party, which has been the home of Christian activists, political activists. Yeah, there's been quarrels, a lot of them. But if we lose the Republican Party, then we have no home, okay? So they literally cast votes for someone who they despised because they did not want the Republican Party to fall further and further into this hellish trap of endorsing baby killers and endorsing militant homosexuals who want same-gender marriage. So, as I've been listening to talk radio shows over the past few days since the election, in which the Republicans just wiped out Democrats at the local, state, and federal level, there is this deep concern that the Republicans are going to mess it up that we don't have the leadership, we don't have the agenda, we don't have the vision in our leaders. And let me just say this really clearly. I concur. I concur. The question is whether or not people like Mitt Romney and Mitch McConnell and John Boehner are going to set the agenda, or whether it's going to be people like, well, let's talk about that when we come back from this break. Who the fight is with. Don't go away. I have been a leader in the pro-life movement for 30 years, and sadly we have not prevailed in our goal to make it a criminal act to kill an unborn baby. There's reasons why we have failed. I wrote this book, A Humble Plea, to Catholic bishops, to evangelical clergy, and to lay people, explaining where we went wrong and what we have to do to prevail. We've made this available as a PDF online for free. I encourage you to go and download your own copy. We have put together what we call an online university for you. Now that's a highfalutin way of saying that we have a pretty significant library of material, books, tapes, videos that are there for you for free. Why are we doing this? Because America is desperate for new leaders, and because this material could help you to become the leader that you and God want you to be. Check it out and enjoy it. So here is the question. Who will define the Republican agenda? Who will lead the Republican people? Will it be somebody who is anchored ethically to Christian values and the laws of God, who is self-consciously part of the church militant? Or will it be somebody who is militant for compromise, firm for irresolution, eager to pave the way for the enemies of Christianity to prevail, as long as they Republicans are in control? And I'm speaking about people like Karl Rove, okay, John Boehner. These are not our friends, people. So the question is, who's going to define the agenda for the Republican Party? Now, there's going to be calls from Mitch McConnell and John Boehner for unity, unity, unity. No. Paul wrote, "It is necessary that divisions should arise among you." Whoa, whoa, whoa. Necessary for division? I thought God always wanted unity. He said, "It is necessary for divisions to arise among you, so that those who are approved by God could be made manifest." Jesus said, "I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring a sword." He came to bring division. And the division is ethical in nature. It's not that God likes quarrels. The Lord said, how beautiful is it when brethren dwell together in unity. God does love unity, but it's unity that's ethically sound, that's morally true. And so the fight is going to be over whether people like Karl Rove and John Boehner and Mitch McConnell define the agenda, or Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Congressman Steve King or Lou Gomer from Texas. And whether we will rally, those of us who can think straight, ethically, according to the laws of God, whether we will get behind those and create the fuss, create the conflict, because that's what the church militant does, okay? Whether we'll create the fuss for righteousness and justice, or whether we'll just sit down and go, okay, well, as long as the Republicans win. No, 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 no. It's not enough that the Republicans win. It's not. What matters is that we have righteousness and justice in government. So does anyone really think that former governor of Massachusetts, former presidential candidate Mitt Romney is going to lead us to ethical victory? Mitt Romney, who caved in to the Supreme Court of Massachusetts and gave Massachusetts homosexual marriage? Mitt Romney, who signed into law a bill that allowed Planned Parenthood to, or rather allowed the taxpayers of Massachusetts to pay for murdered babies? No, it's not enough that a Republican wins. It's got to be a servant of righteousness and justice. And I guarantee you, Karl Rove is not going to want to pick that man. Get ready to rumble.
you.